I had been awake for 31 hours straight. I had just given birth to my daughter. I was sore, I was exhausted, I was running on maybe 4 hours of broken hospital sleep and the specific kind of happiness that makes you cry for no reason. My mother-in-law was in the building. I should have known better than to close my eyes. Because while I was sleeping, while my baby was in the nursery and my husband had stepped out to grab food, she snuck down to the hospital records office and changed my daughter's birth certificate. She crossed out the name I chose. She wrote in her own. On an official government document. In a hospital. 48 hours after I gave birth. Now here's what she did not know. What she somehow failed to account for in 3 years of crossing lines and testing limits and treating my life like her personal renovation project. I am a licensed attorney. Family and civil litigation. 7 years of practice. She committed fraud against a lawyer who was still in her hospital gown. This is what happened next. I'm Nadia. And trust me, you want to stay for all of it. Okay, so I've been encouraged by basically everyone in my life to post this because apparently it's unhinged enough to be therapeutic for other people, which is the kind of compliment only works on Reddit. So here goes. My name is Nadia. I'm 34. I'm a licensed attorney, 7 years practicing in family and civil litigation. My husband is Marcus, 36. We've been married for 4 years. My mother-in-law is a woman I will call Diane, because that's her name and frankly she doesn't deserve a pseudonym at this point. I want to give you the full picture of who Diane is before I get to the main event, because understanding what she did requires understanding what kind of person does something like that. Diane is the type of woman who has decided, at a foundational level, that her son belongs to her first and his wife second. Not in a subtle, garden-variety way, I mean this in a structural, operational sense. She made decisions about our wedding venue without being asked. She rearranged our living room while we were on our honeymoon and acted surprised when I brought it up. She referred to our home as Marcus's house to her friends for a full year after we moved in together. She sent Marcus parenting articles starting approximately 4 minutes after we announced the pregnancy, all of which were tagged with notes like "just FYI" or "something to think about," which were almost always about how involved grandparents contribute to healthy child development. Subtle as a foghorn. She also had opinions about the baby's name. Loud, persistent, frequently repeated opinions. We had decided on Alara for a girl. It was a name Marcus and I had come up with together, a name that meant something to both of us, that felt right in our mouths, that we'd been calling her by for months before she arrived. Alara. Done. Not negotiable. Diane wanted the baby named after Diane's late mother, whose name was Constance. Now look, I'm not going to pretend Constance isn't a perfectly fine name. It's a lovely name. But it was not our name. We had a name. We told Diane this, gently, twice, and then firmly once, and then in the specific legal adjacent tone I use when I'm signaling that a conversation is over. She would nod and pivot and bring it up again 3 weeks later like the previous conversation had never happened. This is just who Diane is. She doesn't hear the word no. She hears, convince me harder. I filed that information away and moved on, because I had a baby to grow and a practice to manage and I did not have the bandwidth for Diane's reality distortion field. Alara arrived on a Thursday morning at 7:42 a.m. after approximately 14 hours of labor that I will not describe in detail because this post is already going to be long and also I'm still kind of annoyed about it. She was perfect. She was exactly who I expected her to be. She weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces and had a full head of dark hair and immediately made every single hard thing feel completely worth it. Marcus was there the whole time. He was, genuinely, incredible. I will never be able to explain what it does to you to see your person show up for something like that in the way he showed up. That part was everything. Diane was in the waiting room. I want to be clear that I had allowed this. I'm not a completely unreasonable person and Marcus loves his mother, complicated as she is, and I wasn't going to make the birth of our daughter into a custody battle over waiting room access. She could be in the building. I had one rule, nobody came into the delivery room except Marcus. One rule. She respected it. Barely, the nurse told me later that she'd asked twice to come check on me during labor, which the nurse had declined, but technically she respected it. We brought Alara to our room around 10 a.m. Marcus went out to bring Diane in for a brief visit, during which she held the baby and cried and called her beautiful and behaved, by all accounts, like a normal human grandmother. I was exhausted and happy and running on fumes, and I genuinely thought maybe, just maybe, the arrival of Alara had smoothed something out in Diane. I thought that for about 4 hours. Here's what I know about the timeline, reconstructed afterward from hospital security footage, staff records, and Diane's own statements. At approximately 2:15 p.m., while Marcus had gone to get us both food from the cafeteria and I had fallen asleep in my hospital bed, Diane left the maternity ward waiting area. She did not leave the building. She went to the medical records and registration office on the second floor, which handles birth certificate intake paperwork. Birth certificates in this state are initiated with a hospital worksheet, a preliminary document completed by the parents that gets submitted to the state vital records office. The worksheet had been completed by Marcus and me the morning Alara arrived, with her name, Alara, clearly filled in. Diane told the records clerk that she was the baby's mother and that she needed to make a correction to the name on the worksheet. The clerk, who I do not blame, who was doing her job and had no reason in the moment to question this, pulled the worksheet. Diane crossed out Alara. She wrote in Constance. She handed it back, thanked the clerk, and returned to the waiting area like nothing had happened. I want to give you a second to sit with that. This woman snuck away from the maternity waiting room, told a hospital employee she was the baby's mother, and altered a legal government document, while I was asleep 20 feet away having just given birth. I found out because I'm thorough. I am, professionally and personally, a thorough person. Before I was discharged, I went through all the paperwork the hospital had given us, including the copy of the birth certificate worksheet confirmation that the records office had placed in our patient file. I looked at it. And I immediately knew something was wrong. Not because I was looking for something wrong, but because the name on the confirmation slip said Constance. I looked at it for a long time. I looked at Marcus. I said, very calmly, "Does this say Constance?" Marcus looked at it. His face went through several stages. I told him not to say anything yet. I asked him to go get a nurse and have them bring the records clerk on duty to our room. I asked him to do it now. While he was gone, I was already thinking through what I was looking at from a legal standpoint. Alteration of a government document. Fraudulent misrepresentation to a hospital employee. Identity fraud, potentially, depending on how the state statute was written, and I knew exactly how the state statute was written because I had used it in a civil case 2 years prior. I was sitting in a hospital bed in a gown 12 hours postpartum and my brain had already gone into full attorney mode. My daughter was in the bassinet next to me. My hands were completely still. The records clerk came in with the charge nurse. I asked her, very gently, to walk me through what had happened with the birth certificate worksheet that afternoon. She told me. She described Diane accurately. She said the woman had told her she was the baby's mother. I asked if there was security footage of the records office entrance. There was. I asked if the original worksheet, before the alteration, could be recovered. It could. The alteration had been made in pen over pencil, and under proper examination the original writing was still legible. I thanked her. I asked her to please preserve everything and not touch the worksheet further. Then I asked the charge nurse to have the on-call hospital administrator paged. Then I called my colleague, a criminal defense and fraud attorney who is also one of my closest friends, from my hospital bed while my daughter slept next to me. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Hey. I need to talk through something. My mother-in-law just committed document fraud in the hospital where I gave birth this morning." There was a brief pause. She said, "Do you want me to come there?" I said, "Not yet. But stay by your phone. Let me talk about Marcus for a second because I know people are going to ask." Marcus is not a man who has ever been blind to who his mother is. He knows her. He has spent his whole life navigating her the way people navigate weather. You can't stop it, you just adapt and get out of the way when it gets severe. He loves her. And he is also, genuinely, not someone who enables her cruelty. He draws lines. He just draws them differently than I would. When I showed him the worksheet and explained what the records clerk had told me, he sat down on the chair next to my bed and put his face in his hands. He did not make excuses. He did not say maybe there was a misunderstanding. He did not tell me I was overreacting. He looked up and said, "What do you need me to do?" "That's my husband. That's the man I chose. I want that on the record." I told him I needed him to go to the waiting room and tell Diane to stay where she was. "Don't tell her what we know." Don't give her time to get her story straight. Just keep her in that building until I say otherwise. He went. I called the hospital administrator. I called my colleague back. I called the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office, because what had happened on that records form was a crime and I intended to report it as one. For hours after Diane altered that document, she was sitting in the hospital administrator's office being interviewed by a deputy. I want to walk you through the legal framework here because I think people underestimate how serious this actually is, and I want to be clear that I did not pursue this lightly. What Diane did constitutes, at minimum, 3 separate legal violations in our state. First, falsification of a government record. A birth certificate worksheet is an official document submitted to the state's Vital Records Office. Intentionally altering it is a felony under state law, full stop. Second, fraudulent misrepresentation. She told a hospital employee that she was the baby's mother. That is a false statement made to obtain access to a legal document she had no authority over. Also a crime. Third, civil fraud against Marcus and me as the injured parties. The falsification directly affected a legal document bearing our names and our child's identity. I filed the criminal complaint the following morning. I was still in the hospital. I filed it from my bed on my laptop while Marcus fed Alara and tried very hard not to hover. My colleague, who by that point had driven to the hospital because she is a real one, reviewed everything and confirmed we had an exceptionally clean case. Hospital security footage. Eyewitness testimony from the records clerk. The physical document showing alteration over original pencil marks. Diane's own signed statement to the deputy, in which, and this is the part that still gets me, she admitted she had changed the name because she felt it was the right thing to do for the family. She admitted it. On a recorded statement. To a law enforcement officer. I don't know what she thought was going to happen. I genuinely do not know what version of reality she was operating in where that felt like a safe thing to say. The criminal case moved faster than most because the evidence was as clean as evidence gets. No ambiguity, no conflicting testimony, no missing pieces. The DA's office picked it up without hesitation. Diane was charged with falsification of government records and fraudulent misrepresentation. She was advised by her attorney to accept a plea arrangement rather than go to trial. The plea resulted in a criminal conviction, a felony on her record, along with fines, mandatory counseling, and a formal civil judgment in our favor covering legal costs and damages. Simultaneously, I filed for a civil restraining order. I want to address something here because I've seen it come up in similar posts. A restraining order against a grandparent is not automatically granted just because you ask for one. You have to demonstrate that the person poses a credible, documented threat to the child's welfare. Courts take grandparental rights seriously, even when the grandparent has behaved badly. What I had was a felony conviction, a documented pattern of boundary violations that I had compiled, dates, incidents, documented requests to stop, and a professional evaluation submitted by a licensed family therapist that our attorney engaged to assess the situation. The judge granted the restraining order. Permanent. Lifetime. Not until further review. Not subject to modification after therapy. Lifetime. Diane may not contact Marcus, me, or Alara by any means. She may not be within a specified distance of our home, our workplaces, or Alara's school or childcare. Any violation constitutes a criminal offense. She will not hold my daughter. She will not attend her birthday parties. She will not be at her graduation. She made a choice in a hospital records room while I was sleeping, and that choice carved her out of my daughter's life permanently. I want to take a moment to talk about the grief in this because I think it gets lost in the satisfying legal procedural narrative. Marcus lost his mother. Not to death, she's alive and presumably doing whatever Diane does, but practically, functionally, in all the ways that matter. His daughter will grow up not knowing her paternal grandmother. That's not nothing. Marcus is a good man who loves his family, and the fact that his mother made choices that led to this outcome does not make the loss hurt less for him. We've talked about it a lot. He has a therapist he's been working with since before this happened, which I'm grateful for. He is clear-eyed about what Diane did and why it couldn't be allowed to stand. I did not have to convince him of that. But clarity doesn't cancel grief, and I'm not going to pretend it does. There are days he's sad about it. I sit with him in that. That's part of what this is. Alara is 7 weeks old now. She has no idea any of this happened. She knows that she is warm and fed and held and that the person who holds her most often smells familiar and safe. She knows nothing about restraining orders or felony convictions or the grandmother who tried to rename her in a hospital records room. She knows her name is Alara. Because that's what we call her. Every single day. Diane, through her attorney, sent a letter about 3 weeks after the judgment asking if there was any path to reconciliation and supervised contact. Her attorney framed it as a genuine expression of remorse. My attorney responded with a single sentence noting that the restraining order was permanent and that any further communication attempts should be directed through counsel. Marcus chose not to respond personally. That was his decision and I supported it. Her extended family, 2 of Marcus's aunts, reached out to us separately. One was understanding. One was not. The one who was not used the phrase, "Don't you think this is a bit extreme?" in her message, which Marcus handled and I did not get involved in because I had a 7-week-old and limited patience reserves. Our friends have been incredible. Our immediate support system has circled around us in the way that you hope people will and sometimes they actually do. We are okay. We are more than okay, honestly. I have a daughter named Alara who laughs in her sleep and grabs my finger with her whole fist when I hold her. I have a husband who looked at a hospital records alteration and said, "What do you need me to do?" I have a career and the particular satisfaction of knowing that I used every tool it gave me to protect the person I love most in this world. And I have the receipts. I will always have the receipts. Yes, the hospital updated their records intake procedures as a result of this incident. They now require photo ID verification for anyone making changes to birth-related documentation. I was told this informally by the administrator and I think it's genuinely the right call. Someone asked if I feel bad about Diane having a felony on her record. I've thought about this. The honest answer is no. I feel bad that she made the choices she made. I feel bad that Marcus's relationship with his mother arrived at this destination. I do not feel bad about the legal consequences she received for committing documented fraud against my newborn daughter's identity while I was asleep in a hospital bed. Those are different things and I'm not going to blend them together to seem more sympathetic. Someone asked what I would say to Diane if I could say one thing. I actually know exactly what I would say. I'd say, I gave you every opportunity. Every time you pushed, I redirected instead of retaliated. Every time you crossed a line, I drew a new one and explained where it was. You had years of chances to choose differently. You chose to commit a felony against my daughter's birth certificate while I was recovering from labor. That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision. And it had consequences. Alara is 7 weeks old. She smiled at me for the first time yesterday, like a real smile, not the gas smile. She looked right at me. Her name is Alara. It always was. Diane had 3 years of chances. 3 years of lines crossed and conversations had and limits explained. She chose, in the end, to walk down a hospital corridor while her daughter-in-law slept, 12 hours after giving birth, and commit a felony against a newborn baby's legal identity. She just happened to do it to the one person in that building who knew exactly what to call it, exactly who to call, and exactly how to make it stick. Nadia didn't yell. She didn't cry in the hallway. She didn't send angry texts. She picked up her laptop. She pulled up the statutes. She filed the paperwork. And she did it all before she was even discharged. That little girl will grow up knowing her name. Because her mother made sure of it. So, jury, was a lifetime restraining order the right call? Or did Diane deserve one more chance to make it right? And here's the one I really want you to answer. When a family member crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed, how do you know when enough is enough? Drop your verdict in the comments. And if you've got a Diane in your life, you already know where the receipts folder is. The floor is yours.